case, the clerk.
Raise your right hand. You solemnly swear the evidence you give the court and jury in the case now and hearing for the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir.
How are you?
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury?
Name is Anthony FLEMATTI. Last name spelled FLEMATTI.
And how are you employed, sir?
I'm a acting lieutenant at this time for the Canton Fire Department.
And how long in total have you worked for the Canton Fire Department?
Got hired in 2015, July of 2015. So coming up on 10 years.
And prior to working with the Canton Fire Department, what, if any, other work did you have within sort of the same field?
So in the same field, I worked for the Athol Fire Department for a few years, hired in 2012, March 2012 until July of 2015. So just transferred departments.
And even prior to working with the Athol Fire Department, did you work as an EMT anywhere?
Yep. So I worked as an EMT for American Medical Response out of Springfield and Holyoke. Worked for Fallon Ambulance. Started basic level of EMT around 2008, and then just different private ambulance companies around the state.
And just starting with the EMT side of it for the first, what, if any, training did you receive or education did you receive prior to getting your certification as an EMT?
There's different levels of certifications for EMTs. The EMT basic starts out with about 6 months, a couple nights a week for about, like I said, about 6 months. Take a certification, practical and written examination for that to get your basic level, and then you move on to the paramedic level of schooling as well.
Can you describe for the jury a little bit about sort of what that paramedic level of schooling is?
So the paramedic schooling starts, it's about 12 to 14 months, depends on the program, which school you go to. Night school 2 to 4 times a week for about 14 months, and then you start going into a clinical phase where you go into the different operating rooms, emergency rooms, OB/GYN, cardiac CCU, ICU. You do about 300 hours of education in that. Once you've completed a bunch of skill checkoffs under the supervision of an RN or a doctor, depending on the room, you would then clear that section of your schooling and then move on to a ride time phase, which is about 200 to 300 hours, depending on skills, what you need. That would be either in a fire department or a private EMS under the preceptorship of a senior paramedic that would kind of walk you through how to do the job and shadow you and supervise that you're doing things appropriately. You do that for about 200 or 300 hours. You write up different documentation, basically learning how to do it out of the clinical set and then more of in the field set. After that, you would, whatever job you have at that point, you would do an additional practical assessment, again, about 6 or 7 different stages of evaluation for physical skills. Then you would do a written test, again, with the state. At that time, it was the state, Massachusetts, to certify you as a paramedic. Then after that, they have another 2 to 6 month preceptorship within the department to acclimate you to the physical location that you're working in.
And so there's a written portion and a practical portion to
Yes.
both the EMT as well as the paramedic training.
Yes, that's correct.
And you successfully completed that and received certifications in regard to both.
Yes.
And those certifications, are they something that is just sort of a one-time blessing, or is that something that has a continuing educational component and a recertification?
That's correct. So every 2 years, we have to do a 48-hour refresher. So it's continuing education classes as far as national core curriculum classes that the national standard holds us to. So it covers different topics that they mandate that we cover every 2 years.
And your certification is up to date at this point, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
You mentioned that you're currently a lieutenant within the Canton Fire Department, is that correct?
Yes.
And how long have you been, have you had the rank of lieutenant?
I'm a temporary acting lieutenant, so I've been that since, I believe it was February, up till this time.
And within the town of Canton, how many fire station or firehouses do you have within Canton?
So we have 2 different stations, headquarters and Station 2, that we operate over.
And do you work specifically in one, or does it sort of rotate between the two?
Depends on the rank. So as a firefighter, we rotate through the different positions, or different stations. As the lieutenant, I'm the lieutenant right now at Station 1, so headquarters,
And where is Station 1 located?
99 Revere Street.
And within, with respect to each of the two station houses, how many sort of different vehicles and apparatus are located in?
So we have, depends on what's obviously in service for mechanical issues and stuff, but we have a primary engine, a backup engine. We try to have at each station. We have one tanker truck, 2 ladder trucks. We have 2 primary ambulances and then a backup ambulance as well. So we try to have at least 1 engine, 1 ambulance, 1 ladder at each station, and then we'll have the backup pieces for that. And I believe our tanker truck right now, or our water truck, is out of Station 2.
And Station 2, where is that located?
7 Sassamon Street.
Now, as far as the sort of shift, how many people are assigned to, when you're assigned to, let me ask you this first. When you have a shift, what hours is that shift sort of concern?
So for shifting or shift work, it's 8 a.m. to 8 a.m. the next day. So we work 24-hour shifts. We'd have a 24 period off from work, another 24, and then we're off for 5 days.
And when you're assigned to a certain shift for that 24-hour period, are you assigned to sort of a specific duty or a truck, or how does that work?
We're usually just assigned to a specific position for either the 10-hour or the 14, depending on rotations, overtime, that kind of stuff. But we're usually assigned to an individual piece or individual position for that shift, at least, whether it's a day shift or the whole 24.
And so starting with just the ambulance, if you're assigned to the ambulance, how many people and what are the different roles in the ambulance?
So the ambulance, we would have 2 people assigned to the ambulance. We rotate either through seniority or through care level, whether paramedic, EMT. If you're both paramedics, then it would go by seniority and swap back and forth for call volume and teching, who's in charge of the call. And then we would also cross man with the ladder as well. So depending on the call that comes in for service, we would either, on a fire call, we could take the ladder, medical call, we could take the ambulance.
And with respect to the engine, how is that sort of divvied up, or what are the different roles on an engine?
So with the engine, if we have a full staff of 13 members, we would have 4 people on the engine. If there's a couple people off vacation, that type of thing, we could do, it's the driver, the step, and then the lieutenant in charge of the engine.
Now, if I could turn your attention to January 28th, into the evening of January 28th into the morning of January 29th, were you working on that occasion?
Yes,
Okay, you were working 8 a.m. on the 28th until 8 a.m. on the 29th, is that correct?
that's correct.
And which firehouse were you working out of on that occasion?
I believe it was Station 1 at that time.
And what was your assignment in relation to that shift, whether it was ambulance, truck, or engine, whatever?
That would have been ambulance 1 at that time.
And who, if anyone else, was assigned to ambulance 1 along with you with that?
At that time, I was working with Matthew Leahy, not Leahy, sorry, Matthew Kelly. We have a lot of similar names.
And what, if any, disparity was there between sort of the experience that you had versus the experience that Mr. Kelly had at that time?
So Mr. Kelly had just started with the department at the BLS level at the EMTB, probably 2 or 3 months prior. I had just finished up his preceptorship, getting him onboarded as a new hire EMT, so very minimal experience at that time.
So fair to say any sort of medical calls, you would have been sort of what they call the lead paramedic, is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, with reference to that particular time frame, the 28th, 29th, what, if anything, were you aware of as far as sort of weather, forecast, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so leading into that shift, I knew there was a storm coming, and I had always lived a good distance away from work. So I would try and tie overtime shifts in so I wouldn't have to commute more than once back and forth. But with the storm coming, wanted to not have to drive into the weather. So I picked up overtime the night before that shift.
And about what time did you arrive the night before?
The night before, I arrived at 6 p.m. 6 p.m. is the start of the shift.
And so you were essentially on shift for relatively significant period of time leading into the morning of the 29th, correct?
That's correct.
And you mentioned that there was a storm that was forecasted. What, if anything else, do you recall about sort of what type of storm or what was predicted?
Predicted it was going to be a pretty significant storm, heavy winds, heavy snow. Not something I wanted to drive in the morning. So if the opportunity arose, I took the overtime for that night.
What did it turn out to be as far as?
Exactly as predicted. We hadn't gotten much snow up until about midnight or so, and then snow developed since pretty much then on.
And in a moment, I'm going to ask you about a call around 6 a.m., but just if I could take you back a little bit before that, over sort of the overnight shift, did you have any dispatches or calls that you responded to, say, after midnight, but prior to 6 a.m.?
I don't believe so. I don't recall how many calls were prior to that. That one was kind of the key of the night.
So you mentioned sort of, what, if any, memory do you have as far as like sort of when it started to snow?
It would have been after 10 p.m. for sure, but I'm not sure exactly.
Now, turning your attention to a little bit after 6 a.m., you get a dispatch for a medical call, correct?
Correct.
And just prior to that, what about time did you sort of get up, rise, and sort of, start doing things around the station that day?
So shift change usually happens around 8 a.m. in the morning. It takes a while to get everything ready for normal business hours. We try and get the station prepped for public that come into the building or just people passing, going around. We try to prepare the sidewalks, the apron. So we get up around 5:30, if depending on call volume throughout the night. Sometimes we're up throughout the whole night. But we got up that morning around 5 to shovel, snow blow, salt the public walkways, that type of thing.
And specifically when it comes to the apron, that's sort of the area in front of the garage doors, is that correct?
That's correct.
And so why is it so important to sort of clear off the apron as far as snow is concerned?
Yeah, so as far as in front of the apparatus doors, is a very limited height clearance between the top of the fire apparatus and the actual garage bay doors. So a few inches of snow would be enough to cause us to bump into the ceiling of the apparatus garage doors. So we have to keep that relatively almost bare to be able to pull the apparatus out without causing any damage.
And about what time was it that you and the other firefighters at your station started to sort of clear off, whether it be the parking lot, the apron, or anything else as far as snow?
I'd say about 5:15, 5:30.
And at the time that you get this call, shortly after 6 a.m., about how much snow was on the ground at that point, if you know?
It's probably 4 to 6 inches.
And this dispatch that comes in shortly after 6 a.m., what was the dispatch in regard to it, and where were you dispatched to?
So we didn't have much information going out the door, just that there was a man on the side of the road. And we knew, due to the weather, there could be a significant call. So
Before I leave and depart on that just for 1 second, when it comes to when you're outside sort of shoveling off the apron and clearing some of the parking lot, in addition to the snow, what, if anything else, did you note as far as sort of the weather conditions, visibility, things like that?
So visibility was extremely poor. High winds, probably 20, 30 mile an hour winds. Temperature probably in the 20s with still actively snowing at that time.
And the winds, to the best of your recollection, was this something that was just sort of a gust, or was it sort of persistent?
Sustained winds and then probably gusts as well.
And so you received this dispatch, and you, I'm presuming, get in the ambulance and go, correct?
Correct.
And who, if anyone, is in the ambulance with you when you respond?
So responding in, I had myself, Matthew Kelly, and firefighter Nuttall had come in early as well to try and beat storm and get in on time because he was scheduled to come in at 8 a.m. that morning anyways. But with the heavy snow, wanted to make sure he could get in and be able to relieve the people coming off.
And within the ambulance, where was everybody sort of situated on route to the call?
I believe Matthew Kelly was driving. I was in the passenger seat, and Nuttall was in the back of the truck.
And as far as during the course of your going from Station 1 to the scene on Fairview Road, what, if anything, did you note as far as sort of the road conditions, visibility as you were driving?
So that neighborhood is actually relatively close to the station. So you normally get there in a couple minutes, but it was slow driving over there. So I remember going pretty slow to get over to the scene.
And as far as this particular time of day, what was sort of the lighting like at that point? Had the sun come up or anything like that?
Sun had not come up yet. It was still dark, heavy winds, heavy snow, so visibility was almost zero.
And as far as what, if any, other sort of apparatuses from your station were dispatched to this call as well at the same time?
So the other call would have been, or the other vehicle would have been engine 3, and just engine 3. Car 5 will sometimes go. That's the shift commander for the department, depending on the nature of the call, how it comes in, and the ambulance. So and radio messages are sent. That's all documented on a third party that documents timestamps, things like that. As far as on scene, transport, clear from the hospital, that type of thing. It's all third party documented.
May I approach the witness, John?
Yes.
I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 160. Specifically turning to the 7th page and asking you to direct your attention to the far right column. You see that portion of the report, sir?
Yes,
Okay. First and foremost, what I placed before you as Exhibit 160, that's your report, correct?
correct.
Okay. And on that right column of the 7th page in view, what, if anything, do you see with regard to times?
So we have our dispatch time 6:06, en route time 6:07, on scene 6:14, at patient 6:15, and we had transported from that scene at 6:27 and arrived at destination at the hospital 6:45.
And that destination hospital would have been Good Samaritan Medical Center, is that correct?
Correct.
Now, if you could, going back to sort of your dispatch from Station House to Fairview Road, can you describe sort of the path as far as what direction, what route you took to go from one to the other?
Yep, so from Revere Street, we would have come out, taken a right onto Revere Street, gone to the end of that road, taken a left on Sherman, driven all the way up to Chapman Street, taken a right on Chapman Street, gone up to Fairview Street, and then taken a left on that. And that would have brought us down to the address.
And as you're coming down Fairview, are you familiar with that area?
Yes.
Okay. And so as you're coming down Fairview, is there any kind of grade or elevation to the roadway as you're coming down?
Yep, so that is a downhill towards about halfway down the road, so a pretty good grade that's coming downwards.
And the address that you responded to with 34 Fairview Road, when you're coming from the direction that you were coming off of Chapman, is that a residence that's on your left or right or something else?
That would have been on the left.
And when you arrive on scene, what, if any, other sort of vehicles or apparatuses do you observe beyond sort of what you've already described as a...
So we had the fire apparatus. There was another vehicle, a bystander vehicle, that was on scene as well. I don't recall if police were on scene at that time, but
And when you first sort of pull up to the scene, what, if anything, is it that you observe even prior to getting out of the truck or the ambulance?
So as we're pulling up to the scene, we see two female parties, non-uniform personnel, that were going back and forth between the body and the side of the street and back and forth. Appeared to be a female party that was pushing on his chest and then going back and forth between the other female party and the patient.
And again, so when you first sort of pull up, you're able to see the body on the ground. Is that correct?
It was, yes, you could see a body, but it was very hard to see that distance away.
And do you recall any sort of like overhead or ambient lighting, street lighting, or anything like that illuminating in that area?
I don't recall.
Now, this individual, as far as the person on the ground, at some point you were able to subsequently identify who that was. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Who did you identify him?
So identification won't normally happen right at that bedside. That's not really relevant to initial treatment. We found out who it was when we got into the ambulance and we were able to do a more thorough search once interventions had started.
So when you first arrive on scene, fair to say you're primarily or only sort of concerned with patient care, correct?
Yeah, correct.
To the point you sort of have tunnel vision to the patient, correct?
Yeah.
So you arrive on scene and you get out of the ambulance and where is it that you go?
So we then go grab all of the equipment that we're going to need to work on the patient, and then we bring that equipment over to the patient's side to be able to start treatment.
All right. Mr. FLEMATTI, I'm going to stop you there. I'm going to stop you, Ms. Tallali. Jurors, that's it for today. We are not in session tomorrow. Remind you, please do not discuss this case with anyone. Don't do any independent research or investigation into this case. If you happen to see, hear, or read anything about the case, please disregard it, let us know. We'll see you on Thursday morning, and Thursday will be a half day as well. Thank you very much.
All rise for the court, please. Follow me.